Hi, everybody. Welcome to Whiskey and the Writings. I'm your host, Joe Oliver, and I am so glad you're here. I hope you brought your whiskey. Let's go ahead and pour a drink today. I've got some Bullet. This is Bullet Rye. One of my favorite drinks to actually mix with when I'm choosing to mix, which I'm actually going to do a little bit today. So I'm got my pour, and one thing that Jane and I like to do is actually top our whiskey off. Not the fancy stuff, but Bullet would be just fine, where you just put a little Coke Zero on it. There we go. And I don't know, it's just a great flavor profile. I used to do Jack and Coke a lot, but over the past years, I've just settled in with whiskey and Coke. So, yeah, hey, let's talk about the Bible, right? We got our whiskey, we got our Bibles here. Let's continue on. Thanks for joining us. Cheers. Okay, so this is Genesis part 2. Well, Genesis chapter 1, part 2. Last time we did a video, we talked about the beginning. We actually talked about 2 verses in Genesis 1 and 2. So this is the whole setup. And the whole setup of reading Genesis 1 is through the lens of an ancient person who would have been asking specific questions when talking about origins. And one of the questions they would have even thought to ask is how the material things that we see got to be here, i.e., how did the rock get here, or how did the cloud get here, or how did the mountain get here? Those just weren't the categories that ancient people would have thought. What they would have thought about is, why are we here? What is the function of things? Why does things happen the way they do? And so we played a little imaginative game of imagine a fireside, and you have a group of people, and they're from different areas. Let's just say Babylonian, and they're familiar with their Aluma Elish, the epic tale of their God and how he conquered by death, and so they're familiar with this origin story. And along comes a Hebrew person, and they sit next to them at this fireside, and they begin to tell their story about how all things got here and why they're here. And so they began to expand on the idea that a God made everything, at which point the people around the fireside would have said, well, of course they did. We already know that. Which God would have been an important question. And so the Hebrew author it's almost like he goes, hang tight, we're going to get there. And the story goes on about the state of things being in an unordered mess, but God's Spirit was still there. And so then we pick up the story in this place of disorder, and the Spirit is there. And then we begin to read about God speaking. And so in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, and if you have a Bible in front of you, I encourage you to follow along, or you can just listen in. But this is how the NET, the New English Translation, says it. So it said, God said, so God begins to speak out, let there be light. Now, and then it says, and there was light. So right out of the gate, we often think of Genesis 1 as a creation story. And yet, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, God hasn't actually created anything. He will create later on, and God created this and he created that. But in this moment, he says, let there be. Let there be light. Now, the English doesn't help us here, because oftentimes when we think of light, we think of photons. We think of the thing that emits from the sun, and it travels all the way to the earth. And by time we can actually perceive what it is light to us, but it is something that has traveled from the sun. Those are photons. what God is not doing right now is creating the thing that gives us light. So, what is being called into existence? It says, let there be. It doesn't say he created. It says, let there be. There is this concept here that is what God is doing is establishing time. How do we know this? Let's read on. It says, God saw that the light was good. So God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. There was evening, there was morning, marking the first day. So in the first day that we see anything happening, God says, let there be light. And this light is separated out from darkness. And so there's a distinction here, light, darkness. Now, again, we got to put ourselves back into the ancient person and in the shoes of an ancient person. How would we have thought about this? Okay, well, during the day, there is light. There's things that we can see. And so during the day, I do activities that I can only do during the day, like I'm planting seed. I don't have flashlights. I don't have big machinery. So I'm going out. I got to have daytime to do certain things. I got to pick and harvest. I've got to potentially hunt. At nighttime, what do? You sleep. You get rest. You rest for the next day so you can do the activities the next day, and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. At the very beginning here, what we see God doing isn't creating the substance, the material origins of the thing that allows us to see. He's creating the basis, or he's establishing the basis for time. That time is happening. And this is an important thing to understand for us, because when we think of this ordering of this tovu vavohu that we established in our last video, this non-ordered state, what God is doing is he's taking this chaos and he's rearranging it to function in an orderly way. We know that time progresses. We have no power to go back, and we have no power to go to jump ahead. We can only be in the minute that we are in the second that we are in the moment we are in. Time for us is about experiencing a linear movement towards the next thing. And that's ordering things. So we're not just jumping around. God moves everything into a pattern of moving forward. And so the God that created everything and then establishes the ordering of time, night and day, the rhythm that we have, right? We go to bed, we wake up, we go to bed, we wake up, thus moves forward our lives. And every day it seems like something's happening. I'm 45 now, so there are parts of my body where I'm getting sore and it's harder to get up from the ground. And so I got to exercise more to keep myself in shape. And so all of these things are because time has been progressing forward. God arranged the chaos and brought order to it by establishing the rhythm of time. Okay? So day one is about time. Now, as we go on, we're going to see that there's this space of time, and how do we actually measure time? We'll learn more about that in day 4, but let's keep going. So that's day 1. Verse 6. God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate water from water. So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. It was so. God called the expanse sky. There was evening, there was morning, a second day. So here again, God in day 1 separates light and dark to make time. Day 2, he separates again, expanses. So he creates a gap, that expanse. You have waters below and waters above. He separates out, okay? Again, we haven't created anything yet, and we're day 2, okay? He separates in day 1, he separates in day 2. What does he separate? Water from water. Well, what does that mean? Okay, again, ancient person here. We got to be an ancient person. So let's put ancient person hat on. If you're an ancient person and you don't understand the material origin of like how things work in the world, you got to make assumptions. And so one of the assumptions you make is through observation. Okay? And what is the observations you make as an ancient person? Well, there's water beneath me. Even though I'm standing on ground, there's water beneath me. Why? How do I know that? Well, if I dig deep enough, what comes out of the ground? Water, right? So even though I'm on land, I know that there's water underneath me, okay? But there's also water on top of me. Well, how do I know that? Well, because every now and then, water comes down. So there must be water above me. And so the separation, the expanse, is a specific word in Hebrew that talks about like a dome structure. Okay, so imagine that, let's put our imaginations on. We're not being literal here. Use your imagination. Everything is a watery chaos. God orders time, separates light and dark to give us time. And then day 2, he separates out waters below and waters above. So you have to create something to keep the water above you from just crashing down. Okay? That's the expanse. We call that the sky. And so an ancient person would look up and they would see this blue like dome covering them. The sky, this blue dome. And everywhere you look, you go from one end and you look over to the other end, and it's this dome that's covering. And every now and then that dome leaks and water comes out. Okay? So there must be water above that blue thing that I see in the sky. And there's water below me because when I dig deep enough, I get water. So this is how they believe, this is how they thought the world was created. And so as God separates water above and water below, this is the second day. So again, he's creating space. Space here, and up and down, and then space and time. Okay? Day 3. God said, God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the dry ground appear. It was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. God saw that it was good. So again, the ground, there's water below, and out of it emerges land that we stand on. Okay, so the water must be underneath it, but we're on land now, and we see bodies of water, we see collections of water all around us, and we go, okay, so now there's a separation from water to land. And then what goes on the land? It says, then God said, let the land produce vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and trees on the land bearing fruit with seeds in it according to their kind. It was so. The land produced vegetation, plants yielding seeds according to kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. God saw that it was good. There was evening, there was morning, a third day. And so here we have a separating that exists, a separating of light and dark, a separating from water, and a separating from land and water, okay? All of these things are creating space for something to go in it, all right? There's something that needs to go in these spaces. So day 1, 2, and 3 is about creating something for something else to go in. Okay, I hope you're following me here. Dr. John Walton at Wheaton College has written a number of really influential books on this topic, and so all of my treatment of Genesis 1 comes through the lens of like what John Walton has done. It is absolutely incredible. And so if you have the time there, I'll link to the book in the notes here of this episode. But it's a profound work on Genesis that I encourage you to read if you're interested. If not, this is what we're doing here. I'm leveraging his work. And one of the things that he'll say in his work is that Genesis 1 is about God making a house a home. God making a house a home. And I've written on this in a writing called New Genesis Part 2. It's on our website, Stories of Tov. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. But the idea here is that what God is doing is organizing everything so that it can be a usable space for people to live in. Okay, so we need time. The sky and the land, and then the water and the land. All of this is making this functional home for us to move into. And so day 1, 2, and 3 is about organizing space. The home is already been made. That's in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The home was made. Where the studs are, what kind of roof it has, what kind of plumbing it has, that doesn't matter. That's the material stuff of a house, right? This isn't a house story, how a house is made. Foundation, brick, wood, stucco, whatever, shingles. This isn't about how the house was made. This is about turning that house into a suitable home. Okay? And so day 1, 2, and 3 is about organizing space for that house to be a suitable home. So day 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all about putting the things into the space that belong there. So imagine you're moving into a home and you've designated that's the kitchen, that's the dining room, that's the bedroom, that's the master bedroom, that's the bathroom. What are you doing? That's day 1, 2, and 3. You're designating space. You're separating spaces to be specific things. Day 1, 2, and 3. Day 4, 5, and 6 are all about then moving in to the home. Okay. So now when the moves are bringing things in, you go, oh yeah, that set of boxes, that goes to the second bedroom on the left. That's the kids' bedroom. That goes in the master bedroom, first door on your right. Oh, that's kitchen stuff. That goes in the kitchen. This goes in the dining. You get my point, right? Day 4, 5, and 6 is about filling up the home to make it ready for those that are about to inhabit it, right? A house that you buy doesn't become a home until 2 things happen. 1, you get your belongings there. 2, you take up residence in it. This is what Genesis 1 is all about, y'all. Okay, so what do we see? 4, 5, and 6. We're going to move through this quickly here. So God said, this is day 4, God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to indicate the seasons and the days and the years, and let them serve as lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. It was so. God made the 2 lights, the greater light to rule over the day and the lesser light to rule over the night. He made also the stars. God placed the lights in the expanse of the sky to shine on the earth, to preside over the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. There was evening, there was morning, the 4th day. That was a lot, okay? So there's so much here. We don't have time to get into all that because I'm trying to make a bigger point of what this is all about. We might deep dive later on in another video, and I'll link to that once I do. But here's the thing. God made the sun and the moon and the stars. Where should things like that go? Right? In day 1. How do we measure time? By the rotation of the sun and the moon, right? So these are the things that enable us to actually mark the passing of time. If day 1 is about creating time, day 4 is about creating the mechanisms that allow us to measure time so we can know how far we've come along. That's day 4. He puts in the place he separated the thing that belongs there. Day 5 goes like this. God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. Let the birds fly over the earth across the expanse of the sky. God created the sea, the great sea creatures, and every living and moving thing with which the waters swarmed according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, there was morning, the 5th day. So the 5th day is about doing what? Well, if day 2 was about creating a space above and a space below, what goes in the water below? All the sea creatures. What goes in the sky in that expanse? All the birds. God is putting in proper place. If Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 is describing the created existence of all things in a disordered function, then the rest of chapter 1 is trying to indicate or to demonstrate to us how this God makes everything work together. So he's putting things in their proper function and order. Birds go in the sky, fish go in the sea. Makes perfect sense. Okay, what about day 3 then? The land. What happens on the land? Well, it says this. God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, cattle, creeping things, and wild animals, each according to its kind. It was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the cattle according to their kinds, and all the creatures that creep along the ground according to their kind. God saw that it was good. Let's full stop on verse 26. Because that's going to be the next video. But for now, what do we see? We see on the land that God puts all the animals and the creatures that we see. And so if you're an ancient person hearing this story for the first time, you would have heard that there is a God who made everything. And that this God saw the disordered chaos of the creation and decided to do something about it. So he gets involved. And when he gets involved, he makes everything work to good. Did you hear that? All throughout this, there were instances of good. It was good. It was good. That's the Hebrew word tov. That's where we get stories of tov, where we talk about God's good. What does it mean to bring God's good? This is Genesis chapter 1, that what this God is up to is bringing the disorder into order, to bringing the chaos into harmony with each other, that there's peace in the relationships around. So if we were to go back to our metaphor, a house becoming a home, Genesis 1 has done that. Up until verse 26, we see everything ordered and everything put in its place. It is by definition the properly ordered home. It is in peace, it is in harmony, but it's still a house with just things in it. It doesn't actually become a home until the second part, humans move in. Your house that you buy doesn't become your home until you actually take up residence and get the keys. Okay? And then this is what we're going to be introduced to in verse 26. And so we're going to save that one for part 3 of this Genesis video series of Whiskey and the Writings. For now, this is what I want you to reflect on and think about. Here's what makes this thing beautiful and amazing. You might, if you're an ancient person, you might have heard stories of God's creating things. That's not new. What is new is that this God that we don't really know yet seems to be different. This God actually cares for creation. He calls creation good. The stories you might have heard in the past is that you're not good and that this isn't good. And we've got to please the gods or they're just going to destroy everything. But this is a story that's actually different. This is a story that the Hebrew writer and then the Hebrew people who told this story thereafter were telling a story that's good. This is a good God who involves himself, and when he involves himself, he actually brings order out of chaos. Now, here's the thing that you may not have considered up until this point. There's a lot of misconceptions about the God we serve, especially in evangelical circles. This God is judgmental. This God is ready to pounce the sinner and destroy the world and start over and just waiting for people to get to heaven when they die. Okay, this is not the God of the Bible. Whatever conception you have about God right now, you have to match it with the God that we're discovering here in Genesis 1. And here's some things I want you to know about this God. Again, we don't know his name yet, right? If you're an ancient person, here's what you need to know about this God. This God, 1, involves himself in the mess. Genesis 1, chapter 2. 2, this God, when he involves himself in the mess, brings order and function and purpose to things. Okay? This is what we know about this God so far. And so when you let the God of the Hebrew Bible into your life, you are inviting a God who will bring order, peace, harmony, purpose, function to your life. This is the God we're invited to meet, and it's right out of the gate. So, this is an amazing story that's unfolding right before our eyes, and we ain't even done yet. In part 3, we're going to talk about the humans that get involved, that get invited into living into this new home that God has made. So until then, sit back, relax, have another sip. Thank you for joining me on Whiskey and the Writings. We'll see you next time.